We will now turn to our audience and to the post-Facebook Live aspect of this. We have some additional questions from our audience, and I'm going to read some of these. Swami, there's a question directed to you directly. It says, different individuals of the same family can have different varnas. We have never seen this happen in India. If you are Brahmin, you remain Brahmin, irrespective of how bad your character and behavior is. This is a long question.
But I get the gist of the question.
Okay,
I can answer
please,
that. The way he started off is true. That was how original Vedic society was. Vedas are the closest equivalent of the Bible for the Hindus, let me put it that way. And it's something that's been acknowledged by Ambedkar himself. If you read some of his writings, he points out that not only that people of different varnas or different apparent varnas could be in the same family, but also people were, Ambedkar called it mainly a class system, and people could change classes. But at some point in history, and you could argue till the cows come home exactly when that happened, there was a change when being a Brahmin or being a Kshatriya became hereditary, became birth-based. So eventually, when it became birth-based, in my mind at least, that's really when it became a problem. Because if you think about it before, if it was by choice, it could be seen more as somebody opting to be a priest. If anybody could become a priest, or if anybody could become a soldier, there really isn't a problem in terms of recognizing a class of priests and a class of soldiers any more than today you have problems calling people as doctors and engineers and politicians and so on. The problem really comes when you lose occupational mobility and make it birth-based. That really was the issue, and when you create a hierarchy. So again, the question is, yes, it was that way, and it became a problem later on.
Isn't this we get into interpretations of history, interpretations of the provenance of caste with this type of discussion. What is the fundamental point of departure that any of you might have with this interpretation of history? Do you have a fundamental point of departure, or do you endorse the history as articulated by Swami? Anyone?
I don't have a point of view.
Okay.
Not informed about
all right.
this.
All right. Anyone informed? All right. These two questions, we dealt with this in some ways, but this is really worth, I think, asking. Controversially, there are two questions here. One person asked, in the USA, Dalits may say, at least I am not black. How would you respond to this? And the second question someone asked, and we dealt with this in some ways, in the US, do you think caste equals class equals racism? Question mark. Yeah. Anyone?
That's a very sound, that's a very poignant intervention, actually. US caste is equal to race and class, I think that would go well with the way we understand, at least the American caste system. One of the things Swami had initially mentioned, I think he's right with the Ambedkar's intervention of it being classes and then eventually gets solidified. I think the cunning Brahmins and their progenies up until now continue to carry the same argument, which is unfounded, although there is a but. You will say this is bad, but and that but, comma, whatever follows is the justification for what is on table right now. Now, if you want to really go with the hermeneutical intervention of caste or this religious text, it's such a complex. There are 4 Vedas, and the Smritis and Shrutis. There is a lot going on there too, but the very premise that you are by birth someone, and what happened in history, my ancestors underwent this kind of oppression, I'm not willing to forego that. But even now, that is happening, by very virtue of my grandparent or my forefather were untouchables, I'm born into that, and there is no escape to that. Is there a system where we can really revisit this? And for me personally, I don't want even hierarchy. Just get rid of it. We don't need to have these gradations, which is strictly, which Ambedkar defines as a closed class. There's no mobility. Why do we even need to go back and talk about it? Let's start it. But how do we do that? For that, we need to abolish all of this priesthood that we have. Brahmins continue to be the default priests of temples in India. And Ambedkar...
You're saying that you should abolish the priesthood? Is that
oh, indeed. They are the problems that whatever we have, recurring in our system. Now, you can talk about spirituality. I'm all for it. But how can you talk about spirituality to a person who's been beaten, who's been hacked? If his procession is going outside or his daughter is under constant threat. We can talk about this attainment of a certain nirvana once my material needs are fulfilled. And in contemporary society, unless that is all set, we will then engage, of course, with spiritual definitions. But to put spiritualism in front of the horse is going to be a great disaster.
Would many people... go ahead, Larry, I'm sorry.
If I may, I think I have a letter that I received a few days ago from the Dalai Lama about the launching of the journal. And if I may just read one paragraph, because I think following Suraj's excellent comments, he presents the issue in the most simple way. And he says, when I meet people, and he's speaking as the Dalai Lama, when I meet people, I don't think about being different from them, about being a Tibetan, a Buddhist, or even the Dalai Lama. I only think about being a human being. And he goes on to say, I am therefore pleased to know that this journal, Caste, a global journal of social exclusion at Brandeis University, is being launched to advance the study of caste and social policies. The caste system, from what I know of its prevalence in any place, is really outdated. I feel that it is a vestige of feudalism. Through education, as your journal aspires to do, we can promote a sense of the oneness of the 7 billion human beings. It's a beautifully simple statement, and now I know it's a long way from telling us how do we totally eradicate it, but from a spiritual point of view, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, I think, is giving us some direction.
It's quite a letter, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Anyone else on this point? Another question, and I'm just going to try to interpret this. It's a bit long. Is why a lot of people are asking? They're sitting in their living rooms in Burlington, Massachusetts. People of South Asian descent, or they're at Harvard, Massachusetts, or in Brighton or Brookline, and carrying out their lives and wondering, is this overly academic, this discussion, or do you see there are practical applications and solutions to this issue in the everyday world, if you will?
I think there's so many forms of exclusion that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And earlier we had a question about the relevance of the experiences with race to the caste question, right? So I think similarly, somebody who is disconnected from this caste issue, perhaps by virtue of not being connected to South Asia, I think there's a lot for them to learn from the fact that this insidious principle has been so difficult. I mean, everybody on this panel is agreeing in violent agreement that it would be nice if we got rid of this effect. But that's very far from actually making progress towards the Dalai Lama's aspirational statement. I mean, the one positive thing that I would like to say, Phillip, is that at least growing up in urban India and in my own adulthood in this country, operating organizations that work in India, once we were able to provide a technical basis for comparing people on a particular dimension, I do want to say that I think issues like caste and even gender, which are more visible, if you could obscure them from the decision to include somebody in a process, tended to fade away. So that's a little bit more of an optimistic view of fundamental human nature. And I'm an optimist. I prefer to see things.
The notion of objective measurements.
Yeah, some idea of objectivity. Now, that's not without its own faults, because who's to decide what's the objective measure for a particular criterion? I recognize that. But I think it's something that should be in the mix of things that instruments to address these sorts of things.
Anyone else? I'm going to turn to this question then, and let me just keep an eye on the clock here. Someone in our audience here asked, how did Gandhi feel about caste?
Gandhi gave the life to the dying part of orthodoxy. He is the creator, and he is the new modern, we call in political Manu.
Political.
The guy who is basically the creator of all these injunctions and the laws of Manu Smriti. Gandhi's life is such a complicated. That guy helped Hinduism live long, at least politically, for another 100 or 200 years, and he was shot by the same Brahminical thinking who used him, another Baniya, and this is where the whole strategy goes. The Brahmins in India want to retain their position, whichever dominance they want to be. And Gandhi comes as one who never experienced caste, experienced more of a color, and that too a color of a higher, where he gets kicked out from a first class cabin way out of India in South Africa, where he realizes that, oh, I am also inferior. So, I mean, if you have to go to a first-class cabin to South Africa to experience your secondary position, Gandhi comes to India and ushers the life where he spiritualizes the filthy practice of manual scavenging. When Ambedkar is saying, let's get rid of this malice that we have, he just fantasizes this, and he breathes this fresh air by saying, never ever condemns that this practice needs to be abolished, and we all need to. And so when we talk about caste, we are basically talking about this vocation, how do we deal with this? But again, Gandhi again comes as a complicated figure where he's not too orthodox at one point, and then he becomes a problem maker for the people, because he talks about this universal morality between Hinduism and Islam and other, but for the caste, he doesn't want that to be projection. He says this is our quote-unquote internal matter. We are like, we are not internal matter. We are separate than you. We have our own humanity. And I think that's what Gandhi has been done.
Well, certainly one of the great, thank you very much, one of the great conflicts, it seems, in Indian history was the disagreements, vocal and written disagreements between Ambedkar and Gandhi. We don't have time, obviously, to talk about that here, but we certainly ask folks to, you're in a library, to take a look at that history. It's quite intriguing. It informs part of this discussion. We're going to take a few more minutes with this discussion. Let me just ask folks if you could talk about keep all these together. This question from a viewer earlier: having lived through the caste system in Nepal, but born Buddhist, my experience in Nepal was that religion was intertwined into the caste system and had a negative impact. However, unlike India, which is a secular country, Nepal until 2008 was defined a Hindu nation by the Constitution. I am wondering if the panel could comment on whether this religious exemption really existed in the caste system in India.
What's the religious exemption being talked about?
I'm hoping you might know, because
I mean, we've talked about caste discrimination.
Maybe is he talking about Buddhist?
This individual is talking about being born Buddhist, but yet living in a caste-based system, and wondering if, I'm not sure which religious exemption the person's referring to. My knowledge is not that deep. I'm hoping that one of you might be able to answer that. We will move on. Okay. I think at this point there's one other question here, but I like someone in addition to Swami to address this. This is addressed to you, Swami, but I think others should also talk about this. It says that let's try this again. Humans made religion. Caste originated from Hinduism. Understood you're here representing the Hindu American Foundation. Why is it more important for you to defend a religion than focus on the humanitarian issues associated with caste? And I think others should also chime in on this. What is that? But the question, it's directed initially to you.
I think the question is posed as this or that. And I don't think it is this or that. That's all we're saying. There's no question of not focusing on the humanitarian aspects of caste. There's no question of not doing your utmost to eradicate caste. But it doesn't have to. But it doesn't have to be that if you want to understand Hindu teachings for what they are, spiritual teachings for what they are, that doesn't tantamount to saying that I'm going to ignore caste and let it be what they are. It doesn't have to. It's not a choice. It's both.
Okay, anyone else? Suraj?
See, Hindu as a word, or Hinduism, is a political category. We have to understand that. It didn't exist until the mid-19th century as a Hindu word. Even in the sacred text, there's no mention of Hindu. It's a political invocation to unite. And when Brahmins thought that they are minority and their privileges are going away, they unite. And for example, Indian National Congress is the conglomeration of all these Brahmins coming together to say we need to front a political battle against this, because they saw their power being withdrawn. And so when we are talking about Hinduism, I think let's be clear that it's a political project. And that's why when someone asked me, or the question was asked about Gandhi, I'm referring to the political Hinduism that, he kind of gave a life, he leased a life to the otherwise, dormant aspects. Now we can go about mystifying and fanciful interpretations of all this hippie culture that we had, and, which is true, admit, but also it's borrowed from Buddhism. We have to be very clear on that, And Ambedkar clearly mentions that in his Revolution and Counter-Revolution. These are Buddhist principles that are being taken, and Buddhist, of course, temples and the viharas were desecrated, and the monks were killed en masse by the invading kingdoms of the so-called Brahminic order. Hinduism, that's why, will not give us any more offer, because there doesn't exist as such. We have accepted it as a common category for us to work together, but primarily it's this varnas, it's this caste, it's jatis, where Brahmin have their own ritual, Kshatriyas have their own ritual, Dalits are again outcast, and this is how the foundation is. But what we have done is we have projected it, it's a diverse culture. It is this great thing, and I think we need to probably question that.
I think that's probably the first point where I would disagree with what Suraj has said, really. The word Christianity doesn't occur in the Bible. That doesn't mean that Christianity as a religion does not exist. So the idea of Hinduism as a pluralist religion of many different paths, it is true. A lot of different traditions and different ways of approaching the divine. But the concept that there are different ways of approaching the divine is very old. It's there in the very first Veda itself. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti, which means the truth is one, and the wise men call it in different names. So the idea of pluralism has always been there. So where perhaps we differ the most is perhaps this idea that you have to deny the existence of Hinduism as a religion, to insist that in order to be Hindu, you have to practice caste discrimination. These are some of the areas where I find myself in disagreement with caste activists. I'm not able to, I cannot accept this idea that Hinduism as a concept, because the whole body of knowledge has come over a long period of time. It's existed since at least 3,500 years. Many people say more, but no one disputes this whole body of knowledge as being existing for 3,500 years at least.
See, one of my people tell me that there are so many religions in India, you guys are so spiritually rich. No, people were fed up, and that's why they went on, formed different religions. Sikhism is an outcome of that. We have various religions, Buddhism, for example, Buddha and, Mahavira. So we have these different big religions, and pluralism as it may be, but they were tired of this. They were like, we can't deal with the system, and that's why they went to form they went their own ways, right? And they said, we can't deal with this mess right now, and that's the outcome. So we talk about pluralism, but we also have to talk about these inconsistencies that remain in this.
Larry, it's clear we're not going to
Maybe
solve
people of
this.
Israel were tired of Judaism and went to Christianity. I mean, so it's sort of, I think positioning Sikhism or Buddhism as being people tired of Hinduism is also, because Buddhism as a separate religion owes a lot to the fact that it went outside of India. Within India, Buddha was another revered teacher by all Hindus as well. So it's just there, and there were several other teachers like the Buddha. So I think there would be some differences in how you see that, but I would still say I don't think there's any disagreement in terms of getting rid of the problem of caste or caste discrimination.
I think this is a fascinating discussion, and we're going to wind it down. Larry?
The Buddha himself permitted people of all castes to come and study with him. That, in those years particularly, that was a almost revolutionary statement, frankly. And that is why a lot of the Ambedkarites who have emerged in India, or since Dr. Ambedkar's great teachings and great service, have converted to Buddhism. The question for us, I guess, is do you need to convert to another religion in order to continue to be a person of Dalit background or other oppressed communities in India? I worked in Latin America during the rise of liberation theology. And, you know, as I was a young Jewish kid, but I was working with Catholic priests and sisters who had their sleeves rolled up, working at the grassroots on a social gospel, and they believed that they were bringing Catholicism in Latin America back to the original words and intent of Jesus. All the great religions have gone through reformations. I think what I'm hearing within India is kind of a people waiting with anticipation. Will Hinduism be able to achieve a kind of reformation? Not just Sikhism and a few other efforts that have been made, but will Hinduism be able to find a reformation to jettison some of the original doctrines, at least as they perhaps crept into what is today understood as Hinduism, to really lead the people of India through a social reformation?
Larry, thank you. That's going to have to be the last word on this conversation. An extraordinary conversation, an important conversation, Caste in America. Again, folks, you can listen and read the series and continue this discussion, if you will, online, and get in touch with any of these folks. What are your Twitter handles? If
My
you
name,
will?
Suraj Yengde.
Okay. Anyone else?
Swami, HAF.
You don't have one, right?
I don't have it, but I'm Simon at Brandeis Study to you.
There you go.
I'm KB as in boy, Pillay, P-I-L-L-A-Y.
Tarun, Khanna, HBS.
Okay, and I gave up mine earlier, Phillip Martin at WGBH. We have been talking to Tarun Khanna, Kavita Pillay, Larry Simon, Swami Venkataraman, and Suraj Yengde. And I want to thank our audience and thank the studio people here for doing an extraordinary job. Sam, thank you for the shout out. And we will conclude this program with a massive congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.